We have lost the ability to see reality. Society no longer sees the whole structure. We've been trained by algorithms and 30-second media to recognize fragments. You look at the economy and you blame a single politician. You see a story time on TikTok or Instagram, and you hear about this terrible thing that happened to this person, but you don't know the other side of the story. And your brain is trained to recognize patterns. That's basic neurology. It has a tendency, whenever you go and you do something over and over again, it continues that same chemical pattern, right? And so what we want to do is strip away that whenever it comes to movement, whenever it comes to athletic training. You see people building systems, trends, all these things, and they're actually getting rid of the physics and the biomechanics-based things. You see movements like GOTA, knees over toes, all these things. And that's fine. I don't talk about other movement protocols, but I am going to say, if it is not fully backed by physics, it is incorrect, because that is laws of movement, right? So what I'm going to be doing is teaching you guys everything from center of mass, base of support, to transverse rotation, to everything that I know I am going to be putting into a YouTube lecture series. This is called The Conservatory. And I say The Conservatory because our job is to conserve. You usually see that with art. And we're at the point now where physics and biomechanics need that same type of conservation. And I do think there is a lot of correlation between philosophy, history, art, just even things that happen in life. All this stuff correlates within movement. And if you can recognize those principles of life, those patterns within life, then it becomes a lot easier to see movement for what it is versus what you've been told it is through social media, all these other different things. And the fact that we're at this point does say a lot, because a lot has changed, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get started. But for the first lecture, as you can see, we are focused on the distorted lens, right? Before you can even go into physics and biomechanics, you actually need to understand the lens that you're seeing through. This has been distorted with time, and you may not even be aware of it. Perception before correction. But the issue is we look at movement and we want to correct before we even have a perception of what's going on. You see one thing wrong and you're correcting. And that's the biggest thing I see with a lot of athletes coaching themselves, or coaches coaching athletes, is they correct way too soon. You don't give them enough time to actually correct. I find it very important to be patient before correction. If you correct too soon, then you're going to cause other compensations before you know the true compensation, right? So if the lens is distorted, the cue is distorted, the diagnosis is distorted, and correction is distorted. You cannot correct a structure you have not actually seen. So usually if I have an athlete, I have them run through things multiple times, right? And you can see this in multiple areas of life. It's the exact same thing. If you go and talk to someone and they give you a couple details on what happened in their relationship and you don't hear the whole story, realistically, are you going to be able to give good advice? You can't just hear them be like, oh, this happened. This guy did this to me. Oh, okay. Now what was the rest, right? Because if he just does that, you have to actually understand the full story, or else you're not going to be able to approach it correctly. You're going to give bad advice to that friend or whatever. But this is the foundation of the whole lecture, right? Before we ask what the athlete needs, we have to ask whether we are seeing the athlete clearly. So you cannot correct what you cannot see. Before we study movement, we have to study the lens we are using to see it. And so for a quote, we do not see things as they are. We see them as we are. And that is a great quote. It actually just fits perfectly. Whenever I read that, I was like, I'm going to put this in here. But people think they see reality directly. Usually you see through memory, fear, education, culture, or ego. Previous experience as well. That's probably the biggest one, is previous experience. But movement is not only something we correct. Movement is something we interpret, right? So if the interpretation is flawed, the correction will be flawed. And that's the biggest thing. So you see that with a lot of people, and this is why I'm saying everything correlates. It's not just movement. But you can see someone that has a bad past experience in a relationship, or you can see someone that They're used to being taken advantage of by friends and all these things. And so whenever you go and meet them, they have these tendencies and these protectors. They're defensive, right? And that is carrying over into their relationships now. And it's the same way. If you have a previous experience, you're like, oh, okay, I tore my ACL doing this, so this is what we really need to focus on. Maybe they don't really need to focus on that. Maybe you're just being paranoid because of your own experience, right? So that's the first thing. And you can see here, so this is what I just said and everything. So opening principle. But then we go into the next one, the thesis, right? So most people do not observe first. They are looking at the athlete through whatever shaped their eye before the athlete ever moved. So that means they interpreted first, right? And whenever you interpret first, as I said, you're going to see that movement through the lens of what you've already seen. So coaches interpret through systems, right? Athletes interpret through insecurities, frustrations, and old stories. Athletes and insecurities, that's a big thing. They will interpret through their insecurities. And by insecurities, I mean they have this lack of ability to believe that they can do something because they practiced it a ton of times, and they know that they have a tendency to do something because they've been told they've done something wrong. And then they go in somewhere new, and they might not even know that they've been doing that right the whole time. And that one coach had this perception of their movement, and it ended up ruining everything. I've worked with athletes that thought they were doing something incorrectly or thought something was perfect, or they would do something extra because someone told them to do it that way, and it ended up ruining a lot of their movement, and it actually messed with their results for a while until we were able to go and fix it. Trainers interpret through trends and terminology. That's where trainers are heavily reliant on trends. You get most of your information from Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. But most people reach for meaning before they finish observing, right? So that's where ego comes in, right? You have this ego, you say, I'm the professional, I need to make sure they know that, right? You may not see that the first few times. I think there's been many of times whenever I've looked at, even if it was an NFL wide receiver or whatever, and they do something. I think of Jalen Brooks, for example. He was with the Cowboys, now he's with the Cardinals. I was working with him, and I saw something on film, and so I'm like, okay, this is what I think it is. And I almost went into the session and just started working on that. But I was like, okay, I need to actually get him to do some of those movements so I can interpret it correctly first. So I brought him in, had him do the movements, and it actually ended up being something completely different, right? So I thought that he was struggling with shin angles. In reality, his center of mass was compromised. He was shifted too far back, and it was leading to him getting stuck. And so being able to fix that actually led to him getting out of cuts like that. And we saw progress within 30 minutes. So we actually just fixed that issue. But if I had gone in there and just started correcting what I thought I saw initially with a distorted lens, then I wouldn't have been able to fix that. But interpretation is necessary and timing matters. Interpretation too early becomes distortion, as I just said. So something interesting, this connects to Plato's allegory of the cave. In the cave, the prisoners do not see reality directly. They see shadows on the wall. And because the shadows are all they have ever known, they mistake the shadow for a subject. In training, the shadow is the label. Weak glutes, tight hips, bad mechanics, poor effort, needs mobility, needs strength. If you go to a yoga instructor and have them coach an athlete, what are they going to have them do? If you go to a track coach and have them coach an athlete, what are they going to do? Track, mechanics, yoga, mobility, right? You're going to have these lenses that they see through, but in reality, that lens is distorted based off what they do. And one of the biggest examples of this that I actually see the most is through strength coaches. Strength coaches lift extremely heavy a lot of the time. They will just go and power lift and do all that stuff, and then they have their athletes do that. And it is good to lift heavy, right? You want to be able to have good force production, especially depending on the sport that you're in. But whenever you go and you are training a certain way, you will feel the need to put that on the people you're training. I've caught myself doing that. So that's something you need to be aware of, is how you're training, and be like, do they actually need this? Is this taking away from what this athlete currently needs? And that's where you have to have constant assessment of their movement as well. And yeah, as it says, those labels may point towards something real, but they are not the athlete. They are interpretations of the athlete, right? The distorted lens is interpretation, pretending to be observation. So, For this next one, cosmic mirroring. Now, I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of this, but this is basically what we just talked about. But this is a terminology. If you look into cosmic mirroring, it is pretty crazy. If you actually look into like social media algorithms, all that, they are kind of built upon that. And that's why they're so addictive, because you see yourself in the content, or you see the version of yourself that you want to see in the content. Cosmic mirroring, mistaking your own reflection for reality. The coach may not be seeing the whole athlete. They may be seeing their own system, injuries, mentors, ego, or life experience, right? So cosmic mirroring means projecting yourself onto what you observe, right? This happens in life and in coaching, right? So, for example, if I see someone, like, or you're looking at me right now, you probably have a very specific view of me, right? You've seen my content, you've seen these different things, but your view is different from the other person that's viewing on the other side of the world, or just with a different life experience, right? Because they have these experiences that shape their ability to see, right? It changes their lens. And so that cosmic mirroring, I am a mirror of you, of what you're capable of seeing, if that makes sense. So that happens through training as well. But you see that in life. So for example, you can see anything, and okay, for example, I'm wearing a blazer and like a turtleneck. I have a lot of people that come and they meet me, and then I'm over here like making jokes, or sometimes I'll just wear like casual stuff. They're like, "Why are you wearing that?" They're like, it messes up the lens that they were seeing me through, and it throws them off, right? But in reality, I'm just a person. I think being multifaceted is important, right? You don't want to just be one. You don't want to put you in a box so they can comprehend you. And you do that with athletes as well. And that's where we don't want to have that, right? So a coach may walk to an athlete and think they are seeing the athlete, when in reality they are seeing their own past, the injury they had, the way they were coached, the system they brought into, and the movement qualities they personally value, right? When in reality, that might not be the whole thing, right? So, the inherited lens, right? Certifications, trends, copied cues, strength bias, mobility bias, quick feet bias, knees over toes bias, coach ego. These things are not automatically wrong, but they become dangerous when they become automatic. Anything being automatic in the coaching world is not good. If you have an automatic thing, you're just like, boom, boom. Mine used to be shin angles, and weak quads. Those were mine. Oh, and I mean, mine right now is definitely tight hips. But that's just usually true. I will say, like, hips are a very big thing. Excuse me, but hips are a very big thing. You see a lot of athletes with terrible hips. But here I am being biased, doing what I'm telling you not to do. So, everyone inherits a lens, right? So coaches have their lens, but athletes also have their lens, right? They have old coaches. They have old injuries, comparisons, frustration, fear, pain memories, and story attached to their body, right? Their body is a story. You just have to read it. You have to read the book before you go and make a podcast, or before you go and make a video, before you write about the book, right? You actually have to read the book. You don't read a book and just start writing stuff before you read it. Does that make sense? So that's where that comes in. But that's where these are observations. Sorry. These are not observations. They are reflexes, right? So then we go into the philosophical problem. We only have 13 slides. We're on slide 6. The last 2 are fast, though. But the philosophical problem. A borrowed lens creates borrowed perception. Most people are uncomfortable standing in an uncertainty, so they reach for a system. They reach for a cue. They reach for a borrowed certainty, but certainty is not the same as truth. And that's where a lot of this comes in, is, as I said, we feel uncomfortable not knowing. But in reality, not knowing is okay. And I'm actually going to pull something from the Tao Te Ching, right? So this is Chinese philosophy, Eastern philosophy, ancient. In the Tao Te Ching, there is a principle that the usefulness of a vessel comes from its emptiness. A cup is useful because of the empty space inside of it. A room is useful because the empty space that allows you to move through it. The same applies to your perception. If your mind is already full of answers, there is no room to observe, right? That's where the process of unknowing is huge. To not know anything is probably the best place you can be in your life. Everything that we do think we know is made up. It's based off what society has told us. It's based off what we need to feel like we're in control. We are control freaks. Humans like to be in control. Our brains are a crazy place. Whenever you can let go of that control is whenever you can actually start seeing. So Machiavelli warns against living in what ought to happen instead of studying what is happening. That applies directly to coaching. Do not coach the body you wish was there. Study the body that is actually there, right? So premature certainty is fear disguised as knowledge. The confidence to see. Not arrogance, not rebellion, not blind certainty. The ability to observe without hiding behind someone else's answer. The ability to delay the diagnosis until the athlete has shown enough, right? That is confidence. Whenever you truly know enough, you are confident enough to not rush. You look at some of the most successful people in the world, how they have all these eyes on them. Do you think they've constantly feel this need to go and prove something? Probably not. Do they? Some of them, yeah, for sure. But they don't feel the need to always just go prove and show. They're not just like, oh, well, they're not just always explaining themselves. They wait for the situation to happen and then they show it through action. They're not going to splay that out and explain it and do all this stuff. And it's the same thing. You don't need to just go and say what you feel in that very moment. You need to give it enough time to where everything has been shown so it's clear. So confidence to see is not ego. It is not trying to prove everyone wrong. It is the ability to wait, right? Amateur rushes diagnosis to sound intelligent. Trained eye delays the diagnosis. Observe foot, knee, pelvis, trunk, breathing, time, load, fatigue, speed, and environment. Back to the Tao connection, right? So Tao Te Ching, you guys are going to hear me bring this up a lot. I love philosophy. And so Eastern philosophy is what I resonated the most with. I just don't think anything in the Tao Te Ching is necessarily wrong. So if you haven't read it, I suggest reading it. But this connects back to the empty vessel. You cannot receive what the athlete is showing you if your mind is already filled with the answer you want to give. Confidence is the strength to wait until the system has revealed enough. The artistic problem. The amateur draws what he thinks is there. The artist studies what is actually there. The amateur imposes a symbol onto the subject. The artist removes a symbol until the subject becomes visible. Movement requires the same discipline, right? So, when a child draws an eye, they usually draw an almond shape with a circle in the middle, but that is not an eye. That is the symbol of an eye. The artist has to unlearn the symbol and study what is actually there. Light, shadow, proportion, contour, shaping, and relationship. And you see this with Da Vinci, right? Everyone knows some of his anatomical drawings, right? So Da Vinci was not only drawing bodies, he was studying anatomy, proportion, geometry, mechanics, and the relationship between form and function. This is why his work still matters here. He was not separating art from anatomy. He was using art to understand structure. And that's where, as a coach, trainer, athlete, you are an artist. You are a sculptor. That's why sculpting is amazing. Because you think of it, they just have this block, this random block, and they just chisel away at it. They see what they want to make. Anyone else looking on the outside, you have no idea. You're just looking at this. You're like, what are they doing just hitting this rock? But they see it. And then you look at what's been sculpted in the past. It's beautiful, right? And it's the same thing with the body. We also have a tendency to add more drills, all these different things. Why? Why do we just add more? Oh, you need more force production. You need more strength training. Let's just do a few more exercises. No. You need to take stuff away. You need to sculpt it away. You need to chisel it away. That's where this comes in, and that's why these principles of art are so important within what we do, and that's what everyone misses because they just try to find it with answers. It's not answers. It is reality. Look around you. Slow down, and everything, you become aware of everything, right? Slowing down leads to awareness. Awareness leads to attention to detail, and attention to detail leads to reality, and reality leads to results. That's how I see it. So movement application. Amateurs see the symbol of a squat. Chest up, knees out, flat feet, hit depth. A trained eye sees mass, pressure, pelvis, spine, training, stability strategy, force leak, and kinetic noise. So if there's any kind of just, and that's where kinetic noise is huge. If there's any kind of just extra bullshit in there, any kind of kinetic bullshit, just get rid of it. Find what that extra stuff is. What are they doing extra? It's not always what are they not doing enough of. It's most of the time it's what extra thing are they doing? Because athletes are trying most of the time. Now, if they're not trying, yeah, they might need to do more. But especially with me working with pro athletes, it's never that they're doing too much. They do try. They give their full effort, but it's that they are doing it's not that they're not doing enough. It's that they're doing too much, right? And so I have to tell them, I'm be like, hey, take this away, relax this, do this, right? And then that happens, and then boom, it just gins. They stop thinking and start moving. You have to feel the movement. Everything flows. You put force in the ground to change direction to the right. Your left leg goes down. That natural stretch shortening cycle. Boom, oscillation back that way. You're not just slamming on the ground. You're hitting the ground, and the ground is pushing you back the opposite way, right? Newton's laws, right? So that's where a lot of that stuff comes into play. But the amateur sees the symbol. The artist studies the subject. One movement, many interpretations. Weak glutes, bad knee position, ankle stiffness, tight hips, needs strength, needs mobility, quick feet, poor mechanics. Any of these could be true. None of them are automatically true. So an athlete decelerates, right? This is an example. An athlete decelerates. The foot hits the ground. The body tries to absorb force. The knee collapses inward. Immediately, different people see different problems. The power lifter sees weak glutes. The track coach sees poor mechanics. The physical therapist sees ankle stiffness. The sport coach sees sloppy footwork. The strength coach sees lack of strength. Someone else sees tight hips. Someone else sees a mobility issue. Someone else says the athlete needs quicker feet, right? So there's all these different interpretations of the same thing. And like I said, the strength coach seeing lack of strength, that's why strength coaches just pound their athletes, and then the athletes can't go actually move. Overtraining is real. That's a very real thing. And that's a tendency I have on myself. I do that exact same thing. And so that's why I have to slow down, breathe, don't look at the result, focus at where I'm at right now and observe. But any of these could be true, but none are automatically true, as I said, right? Because that's where it comes in. Possible sources: foot, hip, pelvis, trunk, timing, fatigue, fear, perception, task, and environment. Perception's a big one. Athletes sometimes just have the wrong perception of what you're trying to get them to do. So sometimes you have to shift that perception, explain it a different way. So that's why you have to be able to see through more than one lens. Because if you do that, you won't be able to explain it to everyone. You're only able to explain it to some people. But do not correct the location of the symptom before tracing the source of the system. The real question, why does my system... Oh, the question is not, why does my system call this? The question is, what is my athlete showing me? I don't know if I think I said that right. Anyways, but what does my system call this, right? So you're not asking, okay, yeah, this is what I know. This system, GOTA, oh, yeah. I'm going to say that's actually the biggest thing with GOTA. As I said, I don't talk bad about things. This is actually probably the one that makes me the most annoyed. But you see athletes talk about knee valgus. They're like, oh, if the knee goes in. But shin angles, your knee sometimes has to go in. What do you do about that? That knee can't stay upright if you're changing direction that way. It's impossible. Because even if it starts upright, guess what? Whenever you go to push off, it's going to shift, right? That's simple biomechanics and physics. So you see that. They look at the system that they studied so heavily. But in reality, what is the athlete showing? That athlete is actually just loading their shin in the correct angle so they can go in that direction. It's the same way your shin is forward whenever you accelerate. It's the same way it shifts back whenever you decelerate. It's the same way it moves left whenever you move left and moves right whenever you move right. Those shins shift to where you're going, right? So questions to ask. What is visible? Where does the first interruption happen? What happens before the error? What happens after the error? What changes under speed? What changes under fatigue? Where does the athlete seek stability? Where does the athlete lose rhythm? So another strategy connection. This is the map terrain problem, right? The system is the map. The athlete is the terrain. If the map disagrees with the terrain, study the terrain, right? That's the biggest thing. I mean, like, I can tell you, I was Army infantry, and we'd be in Alaska, and we'd do projects, or we would do, why am I blanking? We'd basically do like missions up in like the Arctic Circle. And so we go up to the Arctic Circle, and you'd have a map. And it's okay, this map's pretty clear. But what the map isn't accounting for is the 4 or 5 feet of snow that you're walking through. That's like chest high, right? Sometimes it'd be hard enough to where you can just walk on top of it, which is pretty nice. But it's not accounting for that. So that map did not match the terrain at all. So I just had to go off the terrain and just hope for the best. Yeah, you see the elevation points. That was very helpful, actually, on the maps. But outside of that, no. Observation becomes biomechanics when you stop guessing and start tracing. All right, systems. Systems are tools. They can be good, right? But they are not truth. A system can organize thought. A system can create language. A system can give you somewhere to begin. But when system replaces perception, it becomes a cage. You are not anti-system. Systems are useful. They help create structure, language, organization, starting points, as I said, right? But where they fail, terminology matters more than athlete. Method becomes identity. Every athlete confirms the system. Coach defends framework instead of studying body, right? I see a lot of very lazy coaches that they don't want to actually study physics. And it's actually it actually is way easier. I promise it's way easier. If you understand, like, because I didn't just study systems and I studied biomechanics and physics, I got my master's kinesiology, and then honestly I just did the rest on my own because a lot of people have master's kinesiology. It doesn't really mean anything. But you go and study the actual physics and biomechanics of movement, it changes everything. I can look at a sport and I'm like, oh yeah, this, and this. If you have a system, it's a lot more difficult to do that, because if you have a system built around a certain sport, guess what? You're not going to recognize other sports. And that's an issue, right? Now, am I saying I just know everything about every sport? No, like definitely not. But can I look at movement and know what's being used, how it's being used, what needs to change, where the inefficiencies are? For sure. So philosophy connection. This is the same danger as the cave. A system can become walls of shadows. You are studying the shadows of your terminology instead of athletes standing in front of you, right? You're looking at their you're looking at the shadow of them whenever you could actually just be looking at them. Whenever that shadow is going to be distorted because of the cave wall. So do not ask, what does my system call this? Ask, what is the structure showing me? A system should sharpen perception, not replace it. So the conservatory standard, right? So this is the standard that we keep. Observe the whole athlete. Describe what is visible. Identify the first interruption. Trace the source and choose the first intervention, right? If you can look at one rep and do that, you're not looking at the one rep. You can't see everything in one rep. It's not possible. Unless you have like 20 eyes, which I don't think. The only person I've seen with that is off of Monsters Inc. So I know none of you guys have that. So you have to go through this process. If you keep this, like, actually, like, I don't know if you want to screenshot this or whatever, but like, this is what you should follow. This is the biggest piece. This is how we move from perception into biomechanics, right? Because this is how you actually see things properly. So whenever I do it, I take like 4 or 5 reps before I say anything. I look at the whole athlete. I'm like, okay, I saw something weird. Okay, cool. Now I think it came from here, so I'm going to watch here. Okay, now I see what's visible, right? I'm going to describe it. Okay, I see that knee's kind of caving in. And they're kind of sitting back a little bit, right? So I describe what's visible and I identify the verse interruption. Now I have to trace the source. Now, why are they doing that? Oh, he's striking on his heel, which is causing him to sit back. And then he's trying to compensate. And so that knee is starting to fold in because he doesn't have good quad activation because his whole foot isn't down. Okay, that makes sense. Then choose the intervention. So from there, you actually decide to fix it. So if I'm going to fix that, I'm going to be like, okay, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to focus on, you're trying to decelerate and change direction. I actually want you to don't get rid of all the other stuff. I just want you to fall forward and make sure that knee just pushes forward a little bit. Just get that shin angle a little bit more forward. Bring that chest down. Don't sit back so much. Okay? Start to correct that. Now we can move on to the next step, right? Easy fix. So, observe the whole athlete. No tunnel vision, not just knee, foot, hip. Describe what is visible. No assumptions, no ego, no system language too early. Identify the first interruption. Where does organization first break? Trace the source. Work backward from visible failure, right? So with that, what did I do? I'm like, okay, I see that he's sitting backwards. But then I trace the source. Oh, he's striking with his heel, right? Oh, you're just hamstring dominant. We just need to work out your quads. It's not just that. He's striking with his heel, right? Choose the first intervention, not 10 corrections. Smallest input, largest reorganization, right? Smallest input, largest reorganization. Remember that. Not 10 corrections. Please, not 10 corrections. Now, back to it. Tao, Wu Wei, right? This is where the Taoist principle matters more practically. Good intervention is not more force. It is not more cues. It is not more noise. It is not more control. It is the smallest input that allows the system to reorganize. Wu Wei is basically the process of not doing, right? No force. You're not adding force on anything. So the less you do, the better result you get. So let's say you're talking to an athlete. Think about it. You're talking to an athlete. You're saying, I need you to fix this. So we're going to do this. I need you to focus on doing this with your toe, doing this with your, don't do this with your heel. Make sure that knee comes forward. Try not to sit back. Kind of flex your core. Bring those shoulders forward. And then, yeah, just remember all that. Versus if I say, hey, what I want you to do, just keep that foot under you and try to look down at your toe. See the difference there? It'll actually have a better result than the second one, but on top of that, it's way less for them to process. It's not just like actually. So that's where it's the experience has to come in. You have to actually start thinking of those things. And it won't be perfect at first. It takes practice, a lot of years and years of practice. So that's where that comes into play. And that also applies in life, right? If you're starting a business, you're a co-founder, you're a founder, right? And you're like, this is what I'm going to do. Cool. And then you just keep forcing it. This is the plan. In reality, there's all these like actually these different paths you can go down that are actually way more efficient. But you're so focused on this one plan that you're missing a way easier, faster result, right? So the goal is not more correction. The goal is cleaner intervention. Slide 13. If the lens is distorted, the diagnosis will be distorted. Biomechanics filtered through ego becomes another belief system. Science filtered through insecurity becomes dogma. Experience filtered through arrogance becomes tradition. Before movement can be corrected, it has to be seen clearly. Before it can be seen clearly, the lens has to be cleaned. Hear that, right? So the lens has to be cleaned. That starts inward. And that's where, even with myself, I became a better coach whenever I actually realized who I was. And I know it does sound like pretty abstract, but I promise you guys, like, the more you understand yourself, the more you understand your past, you understand your life, you understand everything. And this is where writing is huge. I write a lot. I think writing is very important. I would wish I did it every day. I try to do it every day. Probably do it a few times a week. But whenever you can understand that, everything else it actually just comes together so much more smoothly. And so that's the biggest thing is this is not just coaching. This is art. This is philosophy. This is history. This is life. Every domain teaches the same thing. You cannot understand reality clearly while forcing your own reflection onto it, right? Biomechanics filtered through ego becomes another belief system. Think about that. And that's where you see a lot of coaches arguing. You see they're loud. And that's something I don't really like, is they're so aggressive. They actually do just yell and like they're aggressive. Like, why? If anyone's going to do that, it could be me. I was in the military and I played Division I football and I coached NFL guys. I still coach some NFL guys, but you do those things, like realistically you should have that tendency. Why don't I do that? Because that's what everyone else does. And in reality, I'm not going to say everyone, not everyone does that. There's some really good coaches, but majority do that. And it's because the majority don't take the time to do this other stuff. They're very focused on one lens, right? So take the time to find that other lens. Science filtered through insecurity becomes dogma. Experience filtered through arrogance becomes tradition, right? So then you hold on to these things so hard. You see that with older coaches that have been around for forever. They have a hard time adjusting to changes. New science that comes out, new things, right? They're like, oh, I've been doing it this way forever. Agility ladders. Like, come on, dude. Like, come on. You don't need that. You don't need agility ladders. It's good for, very youth athletes. It's good to help them find any kind of rhythm, proprioception, right? Get control of their feet. Usually their feet grow faster than the rest of their body, and they're just flopping around everywhere, right? So that's going to be good. But reality is that, ladders have been actually proven to be not good since like 2008, and we're in 2026 and people still use them. So final thing, this is what I'm going to leave you guys with. The first discipline is not correction. The first discipline is perception. And I will see you guys next time. We will actually start to break some stuff down. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe.